Okay, so we're going to come into session. We are in session for our select board meeting. First order of business is minutes, the December 3rd, 2024 minutes. Is there a motion?
Move the approval of the minutes of December 3rd, 2024, with any necessary modifications.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Hearing no modifications, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, and actually, is our fifth select board member present by?
No, not on.
Okay.
I'll keep it.
I did beat him then.
For the record.
For the record. I'd like to see it in the minutes.
Okay, next, the minutes of December 7th, 2024. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the minutes of December 7th, 2024, with any necessary modifications.
Page 1.
Oh, did you need a second?
Oh, I did need a second, yeah.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Page 1. Page 2. Hearing no modifications, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Have it, they are approved. Next on the agenda, public comment. This would be a moment for anybody present or online to make any comment they wish. It does not have to be something that's on the agenda. If it is on the agenda, you can make your comment now instead of waiting for later if you wish, but you can also wait until later. Is there anybody in the room who wishes to make a public comment at this time? Don't see any hands. Eric, anybody online?
Nope, Mike just joined the meeting, so I'm connecting him as
Okay.
a panelist. He'll be here in just a moment.
So next, Unified Planning Work Plan Fiscal Year 26 requests.
So this is something the board sees every year. It's transportation and land use planning activities, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, or the CCRPC, staff, its member agencies, and other transportation and planning agencies conduct in our region. Requests are taken from municipalities as part of this work plan. CCRPC receives state and federal funds from a variety of sources that are used in these planning programs. They have a committee that decides how to allocate those funds. So every year we submit requests for these projects, usually from the planning department and the public works department.
Mike, can you hear me? Mike Isham, can you hear me? Mike, I think we're being asked if you can mute your camera, your microphone.
Message him.
That being said, so I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Eric.
Oh, that's okay. So the board has a summary of the requested UPWP projects from Public Works. Director Bruce Hoare is here if there's any questions from the board on these requests for UPWP, and there's a motion to consider. Okay.
I guess the board's discretion, do we want Bruce to tell us more about what he's already put in writing, or are there just any questions in general for Bruce?
Well, I understood two of them. I just a little bit curious about the road erosion inventory, just because I need to have a question about everything on the agenda.
Okay. We don't want the record to break on that.
Right, so I just didn't know. I mean, I read what it was, but I just was a little confused still.
Bruce, can you offer an explanation?
I feel better.
So the road erosion inventory is an inventory that's done on sections of road, on all our roads, but mostly for the roads that are hydraulically connected, hydraulically connected, stormwater purposes. As part of our MS4 permit, we have to do that, and we have to try to bring those roads within certain standards. We've been doing that right along. We're in pretty good shape, but it has to be done within our permit cycle. every so often.
So these are roads that are near sensitive streams, is that what hydraulically
That's
connected?
basically true, that's correct.
Okay, so it's not like,
They don't have to be gravel roads, they can be
Right.
hard surface roads, but yes, near impaired waters for the most part. But we're looking at it. Has been on gravel roads to date, but we have had some on some hard surface roads. On those roads, it's mostly just doing some re-ditching or things like that.
so it's a stormwater related activity.
Stormwater related.
And then once you find something in the inventory, it has to be fixed, we have to fix it.
Fixes, we have to put it on the list and keep plugging away at fixing.
All right, thank you, Bruce.
Any other questions for Bruce?
I'm excited about the Old Creamery Road study, that will be, that's a tricky road.
Can't imagine what the solution would be. But
I know.
You won't be happy with that study.
Right.
So if there are no further questions, there is a proposed motion.
I'll move to approve the projects proposed for inclusion in the Regional Annual Unified Planning Work Program for fiscal year 2026.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those, or further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And a thumbs up from Mike. So the ayes have it, there are no nays. The motion carries.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. Next, Lake Iroquois Association. And,
Oh, we did
oh, I'm sorry, I
interview.
missed that. I missed Aaron. I said you were going to be fourth, and I skipped over you. I apologize. Can you come up? I'm sorry about that. So, Aaron, if you could introduce yourself and what you're applying for, and give a brief presentation, if you could. Minute.
Yeah,
Just for a
wonderful.
second.
PowerPoint?
My name's Aaron Glosser. I'm applying to be a member of the Parks and Recreation and Parks Committee. And I saw the volunteers needed from Porch Forum post that went out a few weeks ago, and I thought that this would be a great way to get involved. My family moved to Williston. My wife and I moved to Williston about 4 years ago. We've got 2 kids now, and one of the things that drew us to Williston is the quality of the recreational pursuits and the quality of the schools. And so with 2 toddlers, we find ourselves using the playgrounds and the bike paths and the Catamount Town Forest and Mud Pond and, just so many great opportunities. I wanted to get involved and help out, and never served on a town committee before, so it would be a nice experience.
Great. So I'll open it up to questions, but actually there's a question that always you have inherited, so let me take it up. This is a pro forma question, nothing to do with you personally, but if there was a conflict of interest between yourself and the work that the committee does, how would you react to it? What would you do? How would you handle it?
Good question. I think in my professional life, I deal with conflicts of interest all the time, and I think you name the conflict and abstain from voting on the issue, and something I'm actually quite familiar with. Identify it, announce it, and abstain.
Any questions from the board?
I like that you have it sounds like you have kind of a broad interest or experience with different pieces of the rec, not just the playground and not just soccer, but, lots of things. So very excited to have you volunteer.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, there is a proposed motion.
Move to appoint Aaron Glosser to the Recreation and Parks Committee for an unexpired 3-year term through June 30th, 2027.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Gotcha, Mike. The Mike, for the record, Mike gave a thumbs up. There are no nays, so the motion carries, and congratulations, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
volunteering. Welcome.
I'm gonna get back to the toddlers.
Yes. Take care.
So now the Lake Iroquois Association. Apologize for the jumping. Jane? Is that-
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
Hi, I'm Jane Clifford. I'm the president this year of the Lake Iroquois Association, and Karen Valenti, secretary, is also here tonight. First of all, I really want to thank the select board, the town, your Shirley, for all of the support over the years that you have given to the Lake Iroquois Association, not just financially, but administratively. It makes a huge difference. We are a small but mighty organization, driven by funding through support from the municipalities, support from grants, support from our donors, our membership, our fundraising. I had sent a brief overview. I think you got it. One of the big pieces that I wanted to talk about was the quality of the lake and the result of that, and the number of beach passes, the family passes, the day passes, that people are utilizing that resources. And it's, I think, the due diligence that we have done as an association to bring up the quality of the lake. A few years ago, it wasn't quite as nice as it is right now. It really is a little jewel. And we appreciate the partnerships that we have developed. But as you all know, with conservation and the environment and weather, we can't stop. We need to continually be vigilant and monitoring the lake. One of our biggest programs is the greeter program. This year we went to 3 full days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 6 to 6. What we would love to do with more funding is expand, especially in early evenings and early mornings. That's when you see the kayaks, the fishermen, the boaters coming in. Lake Champlain has 52 invasive species. We have 1, and we would like to keep it at that 1. And in order to do that, it's being vigilant. And the greeter program really is one of our shining stars as far as giving education, boat wash. I think there are only 3 other lakes that have a hot water boat wash station to clean off the boats. Those things are important. And without the support financially and administratively, we would have a hard time. So I totally get budgets are tight. I really, really appreciate that. But I think what this provides to the community of Williston, we keep track of 3 months, June, July, and August with numbers. But the activity over at the beach, the walking trails, the ice fishing in the wintertime, all of those things bring lots and lots of people to enjoy it and to be able to celebrate it. I think we continue to increase our partnership with the REC LARD. This year we did a really fun fundraiser, the Memorial Day weekend, the Saturday. We're planning on doing that again. And it was great having, families come and just kind of see what happens. And we had food and ice cream, and, your rec department came and had a booth, and just expanding on that. And utilizing that resource even more for people. So I don't know if you have any questions, any comments, anything like that you like that. I hope you all come in and utilize it. We have a camp on the Dimmick Road, so it's off the Heinsberg-Richmond Road, that we truly, well, in fact, we bought Dr. Lampman's camp. I don't know if any of you remember Dr. Lampman.
He was my doctor.
Yes. We bought that camp about 20 years ago, and it's a gift. It's truly a gift.
Questions from the board?
So were you saying that you think you've sold, or the town has sold more seasons passes or day passes with the quality of the lake improving? Is that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's I would say, this year was the biggest year. So the recreation department sells the passes, and they had their biggest financial year this year. And I truly think it's the quality of the lake.
Have you finished there was a multi-year cleanup process, right? Am I correct there, of the lake?
The treatment process, we had a 5-year permit with that. Our permit will end in November of 2025. We have utilized the treatment. We used it in 2021, and then again, we used it this year in 2024. We've also used the DASH program, the monitoring program. This year we did 30% of the lake in the treatment, and it made a significant difference. And it's just kind of keeping on top of that. And again, we do that through lake monitoring.
So if your permit's running out, does that mean you need a new permit, or you?
We would have to apply again, and that's through the state, through the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Questions or comments?
Thank you. That is actually a real treasure. I would hate to see it get unusable. In 2020, when the milfoil was so thick around the beach, and the smell, and you couldn't swim, and we want to maintain the quality that we have, and through due diligence, through help, through support like we get from you, it's really a tremendous. Great partnership.
It is a great partnership.
It's such a great asset that we have for not just our town, but for other towns around us.
It truly is. And it's amazing the number of people that even live in this area that haven't found it yet.
I learned to swim there. The Red Cross had swimming lessons.
Yeah.
And my recollection is they were at 7:30 in the morning.
Yes, I think, yes.
And that part I didn't like. But yeah, it is a treasure. We used to take our kids there, so yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you for all you do.
Well, it's
Maintaining
a
this
group
resource.
effort. We all are very passionate about it. And Chris Conan had set the tone for everybody, so, the time and energy that he has put in over the years, he's still on the board, so we haven't, we don't let him go too far away.
Well, thank you. Welcome as the lead of the board now. Thank you for stepping up to that role.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you. So next on the agenda would be the public hearing, but I think that really does have to start at 7:30. So I'm wondering if we can skip over that, and if there are items in the manager's report that we can cover.
Yeah, we can do the manager's report, and Shirley, maybe if you want to go through the finance report as part of the manager's report. I can start with a couple of items. There's some staff news. Just want to thank Fire Department Administrative Assistant Christy Morrison for her service. She worked for us for just over 2 years and did an outstanding job, and she's just taken a new opportunity and started that this week. So we wish her the best and thank her for her service. And then we are pleased to announce that Police Officer Kyle Brooks is being promoted to Patrol Sergeant. He'll be sworn in this Friday, and he'll be moving to his to his shift, and we'll have all 4 sergeants' positions filled again. So it'll be great for the department, and he's done a great job for us as well, and look forward to having him in this new role. Shirley's grabbing the finance report, but the quarterly report for Q1 was included in the packet as well. And then Chief Collette puts together a good fire department year-end statistics summary, and I included that in your materials as well to look at the call volume and what the department is, their year 2024 looks like. I also distributed the finance report for through first quarter of the year from Shirley, and Shirley wants to walk the board briefly through that. Great.
So Jean, I'm going to answer a question for you, and I thought I had printed it out, but I probably left it on my printer. You were wondering why we didn't have any revenue yet for the
I know
local
you-
option tax, or when it comes to
No,
November.
I wasn't wondering why. Your report clearly said it came out in November, but it now being well past November, I was curious what the number was.
So it was the 1,016,000 for the two combined for our November payment.
And that is about where you expected it?
Yes.
Out of 441, so it's, okay.
It was a little under budget, but our budget's, just our best estimate based on, the prior quarters. We averaged the prior quarters, and
Didn't they have some mess up, like they counted an extra month or less month?
last year, it went farther into November, so it was more in the first quarter and less in the second quarter, so. And so highlights right now for September year-to-date financials. We do expect interest to be above budget again. It's a little hard to predict what that will be because we have CDs that mature every month, and those rates are dropping. And there is anticipated, the last I read, to be at least one more Feds funds rate decrease, and that will decrease those interest rates. But when we started investing in CDs, we were getting rates up to like 5.9%. We are, for the most part, 4.3 to the 4.7 range now. And we get most of those. We use a company called Great Eastern Management. So they go out to all the banks across the U.S. And to look at rates for us. So we will typically pick the best rate that we can get from what he finds for us. And we pay a small management fee for that service, and we still make more than if we just invested locally with the local rates we get. So we will be above budget, just not exactly sure right now what that number will be. Property taxes should be right in line with budget. The pilot payments that you see on this should be, again, in line with budget. We just bill, so the biggest share of the pilot comes from, we bill the state of Vermont for the rest areas.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Yes. We bill the rest areas, and then we bill Casella, or the Chittenden Solid Waste District, since they're tax exempt, but we have an agreement about how we bill them, because they're tax exempt, they don't pay property taxes, so this is an agreement we have with them, and those get billed all up front in the beginning of the year. So the revenue looks high, but it's just because most of it has been recognized already.
I was going to ask about that, because, so the property taxes haven't all been collected, obviously.
The actual property taxes?
Right.
No, but it is posted based on billings. So that's why you never see a July financial, because we don't get the cash flow until August, and it keeps creeping farther along in August. So what happens, we bill for all of the education and municipal property taxes. So when those get billed, they go into our financial statements as property taxes. So we have to wait for the cash flow analysis from the state to see what's going to go to the state and what's going to go to the school district. and what is our piece for the education fund. So until we get that, I can't I can't adjust our property tax billing. So it's, you know, way overstated in the millions and millions of dollars for the town of Florida. So, let's see, ambulance billing, that's another one I do expect that will probably come in higher in budget. It's, again, a little hard because we have 3 open positions right now that are going to be posted shortly, but we also have someone who's on military deployment till May, and we have another position that's on FMLA. So that's 5 positions short, which affects our ability to have a second ambulance in play and mutual aid calls. So that will affect our ambulance revenue, but I still think we're probably going to be a little ahead of budget, hopefully. So, and we're still, since we switched to a new company for our billing service, it hasn't been that long, but I'm collecting data historically going forward. They offer us a lot more data, and really pretty much anything we ask for data, they can build that report for us and update. So they're really a great group to work with. So sometimes bad things happen and good results, right? Recreation revenue just always looks high at this time of year because so many of their programs are happening in the summer, and then, you know, the other programs are like fall soccer and winter basketball. But the day camps and the contracted camps in the summer are the biggest share of the revenue from the rec department. Let's see. We do have $75,000 from the Community Projects Fund, which I try not to say ARPA anymore because it's the Community Project Fund and ARPA doesn't exist. But so I'm just not going to utilize that again until year end. We'll see where we are at the very end of the year, and if we need it, we'll use it. If not, it'll stay in the fund for you to be able to allocate. Let's see. Highway revenue looks very high comparison to budget, but it's really not. With all the flooding this summer, the state decided to send, so we get 4 quarterly payments a year for our class 2 and 3 roads. And the state decided to send them all out in July and August to help municipalities have cash flow for all the flooding expenses. So those are all in these financials already. Post-town fees look like they're lagging, but it's the beginning of the year, and the payments we get from the solid waste district only come quarterly anyways, and Casella sometimes gets a month or 2 behind. This only reflects 1 month from Casella for the transfer station, and that's really the biggest share of our host town fees is coming from that operation. Not expecting large variances from budget right now. There is, when we get to the budget, we've calculated some salary savings in the budget, but I do expect, we got $149,000 for a paving grant from the state. This is our 3rd year in a row, and I would not expect it again next year, but so we have a budget of $520,000, and Bruce, I mean, that is one thing we expect to go over budget, but Bruce is using the grant to help do more deferred paving, so that, just like FY24, we'll be over budget, but there's revenue to offset it. Let's see. Same thing for our utilities in regards to the interest discussion. This is just, there's a month and a half build. I'm not expecting us to be significantly different from budget at this point. Just going. The other big piece is we had decided in this budget to pay Essex for the 3 years of capacity we had left, so that's reflected in this budget, and that payment has been made. And the other, for the stormwater fund, because of all of the work related to the flooding in the summer, the highway department does that work. And then they have a system where they keep track of hours and machinery, and then that labor and equipment use gets billed back to stormwater. So highway has revenue, and stormwater has the expenses, and that was, they say, 85% of the budget or something already. It's very high because they did so much work this past summer. I won't expect to see those kind of numbers for the next few quarters. In the spring, again, they typically do more work, but with the flooding, it was, hi. And that's all I had for a summary through September.
Questions for Shirley?
Brain cramp on why, I can't remember why we decided to move the 3 years of payments into one. I knew there was a really good reason at the time that I understood, and now I'm kind of forgetting what it was all about. Did we have a fund balance?
Yeah, it was really thought out.
Yeah.
We realized the net position we had to eliminate that liability as we were looking at future capital needs in the sewer fund.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what I thought.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Any other questions for Shirley?
Yeah.
Thank you, Shirley.
You're welcome.
The other thing I have for manager's report, just a reminder, the legislative breakfast will be on Monday, February 3rd at 8 o'clock. And I sent out invites to all our board, commission, committee chairs and to our delegation. I think all representatives will be there, and at least 2/3 of our Senate delegation, if not all of these. So I'm just looking forward to it, they said. I'll bring to you on the 21st just some policy priorities to consider that we could then consider presenting to the delegation at that legislative breakfast.
I think the governor's budget is January 28th, so that will be sort of hot off the press, so it has something to react to that. I think there's some rumors of some education fund fixes that will not be favorable to Williston, so we need to be on top of that, because as we know, the higher school property taxes go, the harder it is for us to get our budget passed here for the town too.
Okay.
That's all for the manager's report.
Okay, so it is 7:32, and we can convene the public hearing. So we'll officially do that. Notice is hereby given that the Williston Selectboard will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 7, 2025, at 7:30 p.m. in the Beckett-McGuire Meeting Room at Williston Town Hall to receive comments in the draft operating budget for fiscal year 2026 and draft capital budget and program for fiscal years 2026 through 2031. That's it for the formal thing that I have to read, but I will say the other part of this, the transmitted draft fiscal year 2026 operating budget from the town manager provides for expenses of $15.9 million. This represents a 5.9% increase over the current fiscal year. The funds are used to deliver municipal services, including, but not limited to, police, fire, EMS, highway, library, recreation and parks, planning and zoning, and general administration. So with that, the hearing is open, and is there anybody here who wishes to make a comment, ask questions? Come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dave Westman. I'm the chair of the Williston Conservation Commission. Our committee put a memo together in November, and we had a very productive meeting with Manager Eric Wells around that same time frame to discuss our recommendation for the matter of funding the Environmental Reserve Fund as part of this fiscal year 2026 budget. And in our memo, we outline a request of $150,000 for continued funding of the Environmental Reserve Fund. The current balance of $531,000, while looking like a sizable amount, is not actually very large in proportion to the need. The Conservation Commission estimates that if we were to conserve all of the high-value parcels in the town, that would meet our goals for conservation of land, and we're recommending, I believe it's 30% by 2050. That actually sounds high. The recommendation is that we create this annual funding mechanism of $150,000 a year, because it's going to cost over $9 million to conserve all of the land in the state. We know that the town residents are highly supportive of conservation areas. The 2050 town plan survey had wonderful response rates for conservation. Over 70% of the respondents who participated in that survey supported conservation of lands in the town, and you know, you just can't get there from here with no funding going into the budget. Part of our memo was an analytic approach to demonstrating the needs against the rising cost of property in Williston against the diminishing rate of funding of the ERF. And part of the reason for this recommendation is so that we can reestablish a consistent level of funding, because we're not keeping up with the rising cost of land. And I guess lastly, what I would just say is that this ERF is the best tool that we have for balancing both the urban and suburban growth that our committee and other committees in the town regularly deal with. We see it as the best approach for balancing that growth with the need for conservation, which our residents appreciate for both recreation as well as wildlife areas and natural spaces. And ultimately, this comes down to about a 3/4 of a penny on the overall tax rate for Williston residents. So that's about $30 to $40 for a $300,000 to $400,000 assessed rate. It's a pretty small amount for the types of value that we get out of it, such as Catamount Community Forest, Isham Farm, Sipple Farm. There's lots of examples of conserved land throughout the town that really creates value for residents. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the materials that we provided in the memo. I know you got a lot of memos with that budget package, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I believe that one of my conservation commissioners may be joining this a little bit late. He had soccer practice.
Thanks. Questions or comments from the board?
I am totally in favor of this. I think it's something, Ted, you like to say is let's bring it closer to democracy, right? Let's let people vote. And I think if I had brothers, I would make it a penny and then use the difference to support all that land, because we tend to need a parking lot or need trails or need someone to keep up with something. And if you're going to be, I think the 30% is a sort of a national goal, isn't it? It's definitely a state goal.
Yeah, if I may just read from the memo, why 30 by 50? The Community Resilience and Biodiversity Protection Act of 2023 sets a goal for Vermont to protect 30% of all land by 2030 and 50% by 2050. So I had my numbers a little mixed up there, sorry. The WCC has recommended a goal of Williston to achieve 30% of conserved land by 2050. We think that's a reasonable goal for the town, just based on our highly urban and suburban development zones, as well as that mixed use and agricultural and recreational part of the town as well.
I read.
You want to join? I can comment now.
You can't comment from back there. You have to come.
Yeah, actually, we do. All right. Any other questions or comments?
What would this look like if we decided to move forward with this, Erica? What would it just be? It would have to be a warning every year, right?
Yeah, it would be on the town meeting warning. Anticipating the board may be discussing this. I've asked the town attorney just to draft language what the question would look like. It essentially would say, shall a separate tax levy of, X cent be raised to go into the Environmental Reserve Fund, and then if also some of that was diverted into capital, we have to have language reflective of that. But the analysis we receive legally is once you approve that, it has to be reconsidered year to year by the voters. You can't have a tax levy that's just approved evergreen. The voters have to approve that taxation every year. The board wants to ask that question at town meeting, really consider it the next couple of weeks and have that on your list.
So the fund was originally set up as a result of a tax warning a particular item on the ballot to, I can't remember whether it was an exact amount or whether it was a penny back in those days, but that's how the fund got originally established.
And then was it voted down, or?
No, it was voted on, it was voted in favor.
Oh, so it was like a one-year thing, and then that was,
Well, and then the board has consistently or inconsistently funded it to some extent. Last year, we had a recommendation that from the board that I think actually was finally approved by the voters on the second time around. So we've been up and down as far as the amount that we've funded.
But it's been a single amount since the initial time when it was started. So it's been just a single line item of 10, 50, whatever, $1,000 per year. So this would rather be a penny on the dollar. So yeah, a little different funding.
yeah, and I think it would just be more consistent, which allows the commission and the town to do some planning, like in 3 years, we'll have enough money to make this happen, or rather than, I mean, I've only been through 3 budgets now, and every time this is a fight. If it's 0, it's 10, it's 50, it's 40, it's every year, it's too easy a target to take out when things get tough. And I think if we're serious about wanting to do this work, this is a way to see if the town wants to do this work.
Right, I think, yeah, I agree. Put it to the voters, and this is what this would be for, and, you know, this is a stated value. We support it as a select board, but you also need to support it by voting on it.
Right.
Yeah.
May I add, part of the conversation that we had with, excuse me, with Eric in November was about this penny on the tax rate idea. At the time we were having that discussion, and really when we were sort of formulating the thesis of this memo, it was our understanding that you wouldn't have to go back for warning every year. That is, you know, to be clear, problematic just in terms of the amount of time and effort to pass a ballot initiative every year. It's significant. So it's, you know, not surprising to hear your recollection, Terry, that it was initially warned as a ballot, and then the board decided to just fund it year after year. And, you know, because it is a budget fight every year, you know, that amount of funding has decreased, you know, significantly over time. And when in the memo, we did an adjustment for $2023, and you can actually see it's actually going down much faster in proportion to that. So the recommendation includes that as a point of consideration, that if you fund us at $150,000 a year, it's equivalent to a 3/4 of a penny on the tax rate. We are making that recommendation agnostic of how it's raised. You can either put that in your budget, or you can put it out for warning and have it as a ballot initiative, in which case Reed and I and others on the commission will have some work to do to make sure that it happens. But I think that for now, if we didn't want to go through that process of warning every year, then you know, take our recommendation and, you know, put it into consideration under that assumption that what we're asking for is that 3/4 equivalent.
I can't speak for everybody, but I'm going to tell you that right now you're up against whether or not we can hire more police. And you're not going to win that in the general fund budget, in my opinion.
Right.
And so that's why I'm really supportive of just a penny. It's on there every time. Voters say yes or no. You get it or you don't get it, but and I do agree it's a little bit more work, but it's also, the first year's the hardest for this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and we understand this is a historically tight and tough budget year, not just for Vermont, but for almost every country, or every state.
I think the benefit to doing this and would be that that could potentially get voted down, but the budget could still be, you know, and so which would be unfortunate. I mean, obviously, I support funding the ERF, but yeah, but we have to balance that priority.
It could also go the other way.
It could go the other way. Yep.
That's like school buses always pass.
Yep. So,
Great. Thank you for your time.
thank you.
So I'm hearing that there would be support from the folks on the Conservation Committee and their extended supporters if we decide to go this way.
The understanding is that we would have some work to do if this was a ballot measure yet, and I think we're up for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did Mike have any questions? He's sitting there quietly, so.
What's that?
I don't know if Mike.
I'm not sure how. All right. One thing
The special use plan with the donation of a rather large amount of the property donated to the town, both for the preservation of that scenic view of Camel's Hump from Mountain View Road, but also the continued use of grazing. So that arrangement came at no cost, but at the expense of the development happening at an expedited pace. And so what the ERF, if we had, an equivalent amount of funding, that's the value of the ERF, is that we could have had a conversation with you all as the board to say, is this parcel important enough for us to preserve in perpetuity using the funds of the ERF? And so that the use of those ERF funds is not, discretionary. It is, highly discussed and, really looked at deeply. So the Glazer parcel sort of came to us with that, came to the town with that proposal, and that is ultimately how it landed. The use of the ERF basically would have put another option on the table, which is that parcel worth protecting as a working landscape, as an ecological sanctuary for nesting birds, grassland nesting birds, et cetera. We could have had that conversation if there had been enough in the fund at the time.
and also any other land in the developed, there is a percentage that must be, given to the town, conserved for permitting to be able to build on. That's at no cost to the town as well.
That's right. There's an open space preservation requirement in any parcel greater than 10 acres that becomes either subdivided or developed.
And there is none of that left really after the Glacier project in north of the interstate. That's only going to be south of the interstate, I would suspect now.
There might be a couple. I don't want to speculate, but there might be a couple, and we definitely do deal with some of those parcels that are south of the interstate for sure. That's where the majority of those are.
So we are able to continue conserving, land in Williston, at low cost.
The open space requirements are really important for preserving the character of the town along those developments. They're not really what I would consider to be protection, though. They're still ultimately held in private ownership. It's not the town. If a development of greater than 10 acres decides to preserve 5 acres as open space, that's not open for the town residents to then use to go skiing or biking on. That's still essentially private property. They've just agreed not to develop it. The Environmental Reserve Fund is essentially used to turn these private parcels into public land. And we leverage the use of those funds, usually 1 for 2, where $1 of our funds creates $2 worth of benefits from outside funders, such as the Vermont Trust for Public Land. And it just is a great leverage tool for the town to then put on the table I wasn't around for the Catamount Community Forest, but I think the ERF ultimately only had to pay something like 20 to 40% of the full land value that was developed. So, and then that became obviously fully public land that is open for use by all Williston residents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's important to understand.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Good question.
Excuse me, I'm losing my voice from coaching tonight. Reed Carr, I'm a member of the Conservation Commission. David was here to speak to you about the memo. I just wanted to share thoughts and question about space requirement. We've had some conversations with the Conservation Commission about what should count as conservation. So they set a goal, but they didn't clarify at the time what counts as conservative. So they didn't actually know where they exactly were. So the question comes down to what type of conservation easement on a property qualifies it. And in the case of open space requirement for Williston, if the bylaws were to change and no longer require that much open space, those open space parcels could then become developed potentially. So from a Conservation Commission perspective, we tend to talk about open space as good for character, good for habitat preservation, but not classify it as conserved land. But what I wanted to say was just that being on the Conservation Commission for a little over 4 years now, it's a pretty special group. We have a lot of really long tenured folks. Some of the folks who retired recently served for like 20, 25 years. And we have other folks who have been on long enough that they're in multiple town plans. So that's pretty great. And when I sat down to think about, like, why do I feel like really urgent about funding the ERF each year, and maybe most people think of it as like, oh yeah, like it'd be really good to fund the ERF, but we have lots of issues going on. What came to mind is that when we get together and meet, the WCC members actually have a lot of vision. We talk a lot about what we can see for the future of Williston, and what we see is the opportunity to have beautiful views and amazing hiking trail networks, not just individual trails, but eventually having trails that connect to other trails that connect to other trails, so people can do through hiking or maybe do point-to-point stuff, and we're starting to get there. But also have thriving habitat and have it right in our backyard. I think it's pretty special that Williston, through its zoning regulations, has done a good job giving time, because it takes time to conserve the right parcels and create the recreational facilities that the community needs. We've done really careful analysis. We've done spatial analysis to look at what is valuable for the various species that live here in Williston, but also where are people living and what access to recreation do they have today, and what access do we need to create in the future. And many Williston residents share that vision, as was reflected in the 2050 survey, as well as all those workshop events. And when we talk to landowners, we even get some landowners who come to the town and they say, hey, we want to make sure that our land becomes preserved eventually. What can we do to prepare for that? And today we don't have a lot of good options to share with them if they don't have a large, pristine parcel. It's easy when we're working with a land trust and we can just say, oh, wow, this is amazing, and let's get some partners lined up, and we can get 2 times the funding that we have in the ERF and all that stuff. But a lot of times it doesn't happen like that. So we actually had last year some folks come to us who live, whose family owns property on the corner of Old Creamery and 2A, and they said exactly that. They said, our family just doesn't want to see this land developed, and we're worried we're going to have to sell it to somebody who's going to develop it. What can we do? We gave them some information, but at the end of the day, as David mentioned, $500,000 is a lot of money, but when it comes to trying to really preserve large swaths of land, we just need to continue to stay ahead of the funding. And so we gave some feedback and we sort of let it go. But to share kind of the vision that we have, my first thought after that was, how great would it be with the growth center and all the additional residents that we plan to have there if we could have a way for folks from the growth center to hike up to the 5 Tree Hill overlook. And that's not something that we've really planned out in the past, but as soon as we had started talking with a landowner or two, we're like, well, actually we do have some trail easements between the new park and ride and 5 Tree Hill overlook, and if we got a couple more landowners lined up, maybe we could do something. And what the point of all that is to say, we want to get out of a reactive mode where we're waiting for parcels to come through, to propose for development, and we go, oh, we wish we could have done something about that. And we want to get into a more proactive mode where we're going out to those landowners and we're saying, hey, can we help you make a plan for your property? If you want to develop it, great. We can help you understand the bylaws and what that's going to mean for you. If you don't want to see it developed, we would like to work with you and find a way for it to become a piece of the vision that we have for Williston. And just check my notes here. And so to do this, we just need to get that reliability to our funding so that when we go into those conversations, we know where we're at. We know that, okay, we're going to have this much money this year, this much money next year, and we can begin to line up potential acquisitions. In addition to Mike's point, we do have folks who donate land, which is awesome. But it's not likely to get us to that 30% contribution eventually toward the state goal. So, whether it goes into the operating budget or whether it goes, to the voters, I think it doesn't really matter. The key is having reliability to the funding. And I think potentially going to the voters has more reliability to it. And I also wanted to say that I really appreciated the addition of some fund balance funds into the ERF in recent years to kind of help a little bit where maybe we didn't budget as much as we had hoped. Thanks.
Thank you.
Questions or comments?
Oh, yeah, if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there anybody else online?
No, just staff.
Budget hearing, okay. Okay, well, given that, there is a proposed motion that would close the hearing and allow us to move on to the next item.
I move that we close the public hearing on fiscal year 2026 draft budget.
Is there a second? Is there further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Record, Mike gave a thumbs up. So there are no nays, the motion carries.
Guys will all be happy to know that the only yellow sticker I have on my budget question is Environmental Reserve Fund.
Wow.
Done.
That's pretty good.
So that takes care of the next item on the agenda
Yeah, we're done.
entirely.
Warn it.
The next item is fiscal year 26 budget work session. And Eric, you were going to lead off with a bit of an introduction.
Yeah, I can kick things off. It's been, let's see, exactly a month since we had our Saturday budget review, so everyone had a good holiday season as we get back into the numbers here. Just kind of reset where we are. Town meeting day is March the 4th. The warning must be posted 30 to 40 days prior to town meeting. I believe that's January 22nd to February 3rd or so in there is the window to post it. So you have a start of your work session this evening. There's a dedicated special meeting next Tuesday for budget work session. And then seeing where things go, where the board wants to land, could potentially approve the warning on the 21st. We have the 28th set aside as an additional evening if needed if there's some more work on the 21st to then look to wrap the warning up on the 28th. So to kind of reset things, we include a number of materials in your packet, and one this evening I'll have Shirley walk through regarding our fund balance. But just a brief overview here of the materials that you have in your board packet. First, as we do this every year, a possible budget changes spreadsheet. Just kind of a running list of things to consider that have come up or as we've changed since the manager's budget was transmitted. So briefly, these, after the initial discussion about July 4th, I have moving that back in the recreation budget. and also looking to put the general fund allocation increase $10,000 to put it back to $20,000. We had spoken about trying to do a fundraising component there. My impression from the board was might not be the year to do that, and you may want to have some more general fund dollars. So put that there just to continue that discussion. So I've shared with the board the funding for the Community Justice Center, that the grant funding is shifting to the Attorney General's office. There's some uncertainty exactly where the grant funds are going to land as things transition from the Department of Corrections. I've been engaged with fellow managers, CJC directors, and police chiefs the last few months looking at this. We're advocating that funding is maintained for next year as we continue to look at a bigger picture, if there's some coordination amongst CJCs in the county. We'll see where that goes exactly. It will ultimately be a legislative decision on the funding allocations that's granted out, and then decisions on how those grants are made. So seeing there's still uncertainty there, I've been essentially increasing the CJC line a little bit. I don't know exactly where it's going to land, but I think consider adding a little bit more money from the general fund with that uncertainty might be a place to go here. Also, we've discussed the HR manager position. I transmitted the budget with having that funded starting in the second quarter of FY26. Suggestion is to consider starting at the turn of the year on July 1st. To do that would be about an extra $30,000 in the budget. And then finally, in the police budget, I shared with you the Howard Center contract we have, where a number of towns share social workers in our police department. It's been a really valuable service since 2018. The Howard Centers need to recalibrate how that funding model works due to running the program at a deficit, and also some state grant funds that are being reallocated in other areas. So our increase for that program next year is about $17,500. Originally, I thought we could look at using opioid settlement funds for that. After further discussion with the Attorney General's office, my recommendation is to keep that in the general fund. There's added complexity and challenges with using the opioid settlement funds, and I think it would be challenging to try to make a case to use those, and how it has to be tracked specifically for time through that program. So that's my suggestion, to keep that in the general fund. Those are to add to your discussion as you get started. And then I have a couple memos in your packet as well. The first, asking about police staffing and advancing the Baker report. So as the board considers adding staffing in the police department there, my suggestions of places to look are looking at a full-time social worker position as we build out the community support services unit. Staff, we need a little more time to figure out the right title exactly, but our thought in looking at this in the plan is requiring professional credentials as a social worker who would be tasked with interfacing with all town departments to aid in the overall well-being of the community, food assisting police and fire on call response, especially involving mental health and substance use resource needs. Also have the position take a proactive approach to working with community members in need, find that resource navigation to folks in a proactive manner, and could also be a resource for folks who are clients with the Community Justice Center as well. So that's one piece, and then continuing to expand the patrol division capacity that was outlined in Colonel Baker's report. We currently have 15 positions in that division. He's recommending growing that to 20. As we look to add officers and capacity there, there's a cost to that year to year. So we think those are kind of the areas in tandem to look at if you think about additional police staffing for next year. And then finally, to follow up on what Jean had brought up, looking at capital budget potential deferrals for a year as we have the debt service with some bonds maturing in FY27. Went through the capital budget with Shirley and looked at our equipment funds and create a list of things that are several years out from needing to replace. And the thought here is, if we defer those sinking fund allocations in FY26 and double that up in FY27, and we maintained our funding that we would be paying for these bond payments, we've got about $280,000 of debt maturing. So we could then preserve that space to roll it into new debt by using it for one-time allocations for a year or two. As the board thinks about some of these very large projects, the library renovation and addition, and the communication infrastructure needs moving ahead. So we've identified, going through the capital budget, just over $110,000 of those projects are a little bit further out on the capital replacement schedule that you could consider reducing the budget by that amount of money in FY26 on the expense side, but understanding you would need to make that up in either FY27 or sprinkle it over multiple years to the replacement dates for these assets coming up.
But the point being, you'd make it up in FY27 and still, you'd be filling in a hole, essentially. It wouldn't raise your taxes because you have something less and less.
And the $110,000, that's right around a half cent on the tax rate. Cent rate is about $220,000. And I will turn it to Shirley.
I was just going to do an addendum to that memo, Eric, as I was preparing the September financial statements. The other thing, it has $280,000, but we have $45,000 coming from the sidewalk fund to help fund the debt service on the sidewalk bond, which is going to be paid off. So that $45,000 will go away. So we're looking at like a net $235 instead of the $280.
You can stay if you want. I'm going to toss it to you next. Shirley handed out this evening, and Mike, I'll email this over to you. But as the audit progressed the last month, Shirley's worked to update our unassigned fund balance estimate, and it's good news to think about here as these numbers get trued up through the audit and thinking about our ratios and this fund. So I'll Shirley walk through the memo for the board.
Okie dokie. So the other, the number did increase a little bit from the last time we presented it on December 3rd. But when I did the calculation this time, I actually did it based on the way it would be presented in the audit. The way the fund balance rolls is you have your total fund balance, and then you have to take out committed funds, you take out non-spendable funds, you take out assigned funds to get to your unassigned. So I went through that calculation with the numbers I have now. So our fund balance, our unassigned fund balance at the end of the day when we were estimating out to FY26 has increased. I don't know if I brought the old number with me the last time we presented it.
We're just over $2 million, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to say it was like 750,000. So these, so for FY25, we do have, we put some rough numbers to some budget versus actual variance that we know of. Some salary savings offset by some other salary expenses, and then interest is in there. So right now, we're looking at actual expenses being over budget by about $45,000, and some revenue also over budget. So the net of that was $45,000. And then we're just rolling in what we have right now in the FY26 budget for tax reduction and capital funding, estimated $2.8 million. So the next part of the memo just says, well, actually, I'm going to step back for a minute because I think something really important it's in the memo and you can read it, but I think it's important to say it. And I know Eric and I are always like worried about spending too much of the fund balance because it is our only rainy day fund. So if we financially have some catastrophe, that is the only source of funds we have. We also have that, I mean, you can reallocate the community projects funds that also aren't spent. I mean, that's there, but those are one-time funds and those are going to be gone. But in the long run, this is our only unassigned funds to be able to work with. So, so maybe we're a little conservative and like to hold on to those for that rainy day. So the next part of the memo just looks at the budgeted expenses where they are right now without any changes. So this is based on the December 3rd budget proposal, and what 10% and 20% of those budgeted expenses are. What that number looks like, because that's the select board policy in regards to the fund balance we'd like to maintain. So based on the estimated fund balance and the FY26 budgeted expenses, roughly 17.9%. So closer to the 20%, to the higher end of that. And then at the bottom of their site also included the Government Finance Officers Association. Their recommendation is unassigned fund balance equal to 2 months of your budgeted expenses. 2 months would be, based on this budget, again, is just short of 2.7 million. We're looking at 2.8 million. So that is sort of right in line with the GFOA recommends.
When we transmitted back in November, that ratio was more like 13%. So once this is, we essentially, make sure I say this right, Shirley, we had allocated funds for relief for tax reduction in FY24, but we, deficit budgeting, and we didn't need to utilize those funds in FY24.
Right.
So that's how it continued to maintain this level. So overall, this gives the board what that, this is all a projected ratio, looking at the end of FY26, but if you were, as you're looking at balancing the budget, thinking about using some additional fund balance for tax reduction, there's a little more room here to think about.
The other thing I had written a note and just saw it here tonight was I was supposed to bring you back a community projects fund update now that I know that we are not going to use any of that money in the FY24 budget. So I will update that for you next time and send it to Eric to send out so you'll know where we are in that regard.
So those are the updates we have for you since we last met, and staff is here to answer your questions as you begin your deliberations. If there are scenarios or other things you'd like us to run for your meeting next week, that direction this meeting would be helpful for us to do the staff work this week. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Questions, comments, ideas?
I think at our last meeting, Gene mentioned trying to keep the increase below 5%, like 4.9. So now with 112,000 that we have on the bottom line, we've reduced it from 5.9 to 5.2. So I'm looking at what would the approximate number be to reduce it to 4.9 by reducing it by 0.3%.
But that's not, is that number including the changes you noted?
It would not include the changes on the spreadsheet.
So that would bring it.
Add any of those back.
Yeah. So that was, so that's, those additions are.
About the same, so we're back at
65, additional 65, so that's half of that difference, roughly, or more than half that difference, yeah. So we're back, and then that does also include if we want to add a police officer or a social worker?
I'm thinking, I just say my thoughts on the police officer is that I'd be willing personally to go to the town and say, we work to keep it under 5%, and we want to add 2 police officers on top of that. Mm-hmm. With the understanding that if the budget doesn't pass, the police officers are what don't happen. That's, because that's sort of that's the ad. The HR, I'm still struggling a little bit with the HR position as far as messaging on that one. I do believe we need an HR position. I would have been happier if there was something coming out of that sort of baseline budget to make up for that, but I don't know the workings of, this office well enough to recommend anything, but that's right. I don't think we can get the 2 police officers and stay under 5, and I'd rather not wait. So,
in regards to the 2 police officers, I'm going to actually advocate for 1 additional police officer and the social worker. Slightly biased as a social worker myself, but I do think the social worker position is imperative. And I think that in terms of community policing and just the way our town is currently, the current needs of our town, I think that a social worker should, as per the Baker report too, should be one of our next hires. So I would advocate if we are going to put forth 2 positions, it would be 1 patrol officer and 1 social worker.
both, 1 patrol officer and 1 social worker?
Like, if we're going to put forth 2 positions. If we're only putting forth 1 position, I would advocate it be the social worker first, and then the additional Patrol officer, we are currently 2 officers in the process of, or needing to fill 2 officers' positions. And so I would like to see what the police department would look like with fully staffed and with a social worker, so. Before, we say how many more we need to add on in the immediate need. But I'm also going to say something that I probably have never said, which is that now with the unassigned fund balance news, I would feel also comfortable using a little more of the unassigned fund balance. Not a lot, just a little bit. This may be the first time I've ever said that, towards this budget.
Would it be more beneficial for the social worker to be under the town budget than the police department budget? Would that save us money?
It would be in the general fund still.
Does the social worker have to be under the police budget?
No, but I mean, ultimately, it's all coming from the general fund budget, so it would just be a matter of who's supervising that person.
Same pot of money. I'd be in favor of 1 police officer and 1 social worker as well. I think the Baker report is, we can't just let that sit on a shelf somewhere. Town has grown, and frankly, we did not keep up with the policing needs, in addition to probably some other needs, and we've got to bite the bullet at some point. One of the things that I've been really impressed with over the years on this board is that we've really overall been an eat your vegetables kind of select board. Or it's like not, there's probably terrible terms for this, but like the headline sexy stuff is always fire department, fire truck, firefighter, police officer, public safety equipment. But all of that stuff works well, if at all, because we have the infrastructure behind it. And the infrastructure behind it, again, with the number of towns that have full-time HR directors that have fewer employees than we have is huge. Well, big. And that's. I don't think we can continue operating like that. It's, bear with me, but I saw this wonderful thing about the Apollo missions the other day, and one of the things that they were very clear on is that everybody contributed to the success of that mission, and they went all the way through even to people who were the custodians. That those people should feel like they had something to do with it, and I think it's the same concept here with an HR director. So I think I'd advocate for that. And if the reserve fund has to be dipped into for tax relief to get there, I'd be in favor of it at this point.
Budget, it's a 1% increase, but the thing that it's easy to get lost in the thinking about that is that the school district has a declining enrollment problem, and this town does not have a declining resident problem. We have a growing resident problem, which is not a problem, but it certainly drives higher need for services, and I think the residents, at least that speak to me, really want to make sure that our town does not get into any kind of trouble that Burlington's facing. And so I think we need to stick with our plan and try our best to convince people that that's the way to maintain the quality of life we have in Williston, is to not let our public safety folks fall too far behind.
One thing that Eric put into his presentation when we first started out here is that if you look at the overall tax bill for the town, most people just look at the bottom line. The tax liability from the municipal tax rate is 15% of the bill. And people don't realize what you're getting for 15% of this number.
Well, in this case, it's going to work well for us because right now the school board's being told that we'll have a tax decrease in Williston based on the school
Tax decrease.
budget this year, so.
I hope they're right.
They are right.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, and actually, while we're on this subject, it's more of a general concept thing, but I just wanted to get this out. Gene, you talked about this a while ago, that I've been hearing from people, why, with all this development in town, how come our property taxes are going up? And it's a decent question, but it's the answer is that there's other stuff that people aren't really factoring into the whole concept, and that's that, we do have a full-time firefighting, operation here. We do have EMS people that can get to your door in 2 or 3 minutes. With a town of about 10,000 people, I don't know that we would have that number of people who are on at 11 o'clock at night. I grew up in Richmond where literally the air raid siren would ring to summon the firefighters. It was even before CBs. Although Smokey and the Bandit came out after that. But the truth is that the development that has gone on here has required additional services. It doesn't match up entirely that we make a profit off of the development, but we get a lot of services for a marginal increase in property taxes, which again, I think we're now the third, we used to be the second, now we're the third lowest municipal property tax rate in Chittenden County. But when you look at, we look at the towns that don't provide a whole lot of services compared to us, we're the lowest of the towns that actually provide stuff. So I mean, I bring all that up because I think that in terms of education of the public and selling the budget, that we've got to make that point known and emphasized, because otherwise people are going to look at the new hotels, they're going to look at the U-Haul building, they're going to look at all these other things and go, it's not the town I recognize, and my taxes are going up too, so I'm going to vote no for the budget. Anyway, that's it. I cautioned that wasn't directly on point for our conversation. It wasn't, but I'm done now. So.
Benefit of being chair, you can go on a rant.
No, you know what? That's everybody can rant.
So I'm thinking of like directives for you all though, like we want to think of like what it would look like to add in a police and the social worker position to the budget, and then to factor in maybe these deferments for the capital expenditures. In terms of using the fund balance, since we had expected that the fund balance was going to be down, you said 13% was what you had originally had it. So what if we explored bringing it back down to like 15, just for numbers and just to see where that would put us? Pains me, but still higher than we thought. I can do it. But it's still higher than what we anticipated originally. And we had anticipated utilizing that fund for tax reduction purposes in previous years that we haven't needed. And fingers crossed, we might not need it again in this budget. But if that could mean the difference of keeping, the tax rate to a smaller increase, and also providing these services for the town for this purpose right now, I say that's what it's there for. And let's see.
Agree.
So the additions, can I just ask about the opioid settlement? I know that you're not comfortable using it for the Howard Center community outreach. Does that mean that there's opioid settlement money that could be used for something else?
So I was exploring this over the last month, and part of what I was looking at was if we could use the opioid settlement money to fund the social worker position for the first year, or part of the first year. We've got $95,000 received from that settlement, and we'll receive about, projected over the next 12 years, about $15,000 a year, so a little over $150,000 more projected. After I looked at how some other states have used it, but I spoke with the Assistant Attorney General who's managing the settlement here last week, and After speaking with her, we would need to draw a clear nexus to assistance with substance use disorder connected with opioids. So if we look to have a social worker position, we would have to gauge how much of their time, percentage-wise, is going to be used towards that part of the service. It's hard to gauge that right now, and you also are not supposed to use those funds to supplant something the general fund's being used for. So if, say, we used a big chunk of that money for year one, and then we said, well, we're going to just replace it with the general fund, that would be frowned upon as well. So after speaking through it, those scenarios with the AG's office, it led me back to thinking that we should hold those funds for a different purpose.
And aren't there administrative entanglements too, that you have to prove that the funding is going toward an opiate related issue and not just general stuff, and you have to you have to keep track of that kind of thing? Yeah. So it would have to make sure we could true up that use in the future. And also looking at the Howard Center example, we would have to make sure that that extra $17,000 correlated with that service to members of the community through that outreach program that have to be tracked by the Howard Center. So it created these complexities that I'm not certain we're able to.
Well, I mean, it sounds like if our police department had data that said that they are running into so many incidents and that they're trying to cover it with police, and that this new position, that's supplanting the new position, is going to be targeted, half the time is going to be, and here's the data that says that half the time would be on this issue, then you could probably figure out how to make it work. But if you don't have that kind of data or that kind of volume, if you're talking about 10% of a position, then it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I tried with the chief about that the other day too, and it's
But having a social worker already in place, they could then implement the programming to utilize the funding, and they would know, where that funding should be used and how to use it, and create programming to utilize that funding. But they need to be in place first to determine that and collect that data and do all those things.
That's a good point.
So.
All right. Well, I like your suggestion, Greta. I do. I mean, these numbers are, they're going to be 2 positions. They'll be 6% or so.
Yeah.
Just my mind always goes at this point to how do I explain it to my neighbors, and I like the keeping it under 5% and adding 2 police officers just works in my narrative.
And I'm hopeful that if we, between the, capital deferrals and the use of more additional fund balance, we can maybe get somewhere closer to that.
I'm hoping we get under some point, we are still surviving we're still paying for the wage pressure post-COVID and post-COVID, right? Yep. We're still kind of catching up budget-wise because all these things were happening after budgets passed. So I think hopefully we're getting on top of that, but we have getting the compensation to a point where we can keep our public safety employees here has been a heavy lift.
Yeah, and I think increasing staffing too, and decreasing the burden on our public safety staff is part of that too. Having more colleagues to work with and to serve our town will also increase the employee satisfaction. So.
Second highest for calls per officer, aside from Burlington and South Burlington.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good data.
Yeah, I think overall expense percentage increase with adding those positions, even scaling back the capital, so we be removing 110,000, but with these positions roughly you're talking about 230 or so, and then considering what you want to do with this budget ad sheet, that could push it more towards the $300,000.
So we're adding 3 and taking out 1, so we're 200
yes,
up.
Somewhere.
So the question is, can you get there with fund balance or other thoughtful things? Or maybe we don't get these positions for the full year.
Yeah, so that'll, the expense will always be the expense
Yeah.
number, but the tax increase, the tax implications, that can be, on the revenue side, can, some work there.
And maybe that's the thing to play with is, what does it look like adding, the new patrol officer and social worker in October versus July, or, whatever. What is that, can that savings get us to where we want to be, that 5 or whatever it is?
Realistically, we're probably going to have an easier time hiring the social worker position than we will.
Absolutely, absolutely. But
Maybe that one's a full year and the officer is a half a year.
exactly, whatever, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
or they have to go to the academy, the February academy.
So, right, so if, hire them in January anyway, yeah, so if we know that that's gonna be the case, then put them in January, February, and, yeah. But, yeah.
Does that give you guidance or
Yeah,
confusion?
no, that's helpful. I appreciate the conversation. I listed 4 possible items on this list, is how the board feels about those items, and also in my transmittal, there were things I decreased, for example, the social services funding line. Well, I took some money out of that, and some other overall things in that transmittal, just if there's anything from the general fund that I reduced initially that you want to revisit, that guidance would be helpful as well as you look at bottom line here.
I was looking at the funding for LIA while they were talking. So Richmond provides 2,000 to LIA, and Heinsberg funds 7,500, and they have for years. We were 15, and then we've been 10, and
Yeah.
it's 5 in this year's, but in the FY26 budget.
So Eric, you're talking about this table you have in your transmittal?
Page
right?
9.
Yeah. So,
I can pull it out, I'm just being lazy.
so I looked at this, and my take was that, the GBIC and the Winooski Park Valley District, the Lake Iroquois, feel bad about that, but home health, they all seem very small, and perhaps if we're running ahead in the budget, we could restore some of that funding real time, but if it helps get us closer, your reasoning makes sense to me, that in a tough year, it's belt tightening. The Environmental Reserve Fund we talked about, which is why it was a big sticker on my book. And we're restoring most of the 4th of July, not all, but some, right? So.
I see the 4th of July too as let's restore it and plan for fundraising, like, while we have the funding, if we're going to continue the funding this year, that doesn't mean we should sit on establishing a committee to begin the thoughtful fundraising process and do all of that. So that way, if next year we want to, say, reduce that funding, the mechanisms are already in place to start raising that money.
We have maybe a little bit of experience on how feasible it is.
Exactly.
Pretty bummed about the flowers, though. The flowers, I love the flowers in this town.
Well, actually, that one worked out a little bit because it's the intersection on Mountain View Road and Route 2A. That's going to be V-Trans is going to be putting that new intersection in. So those flower beds are becoming V-Trans right at night. So that's where that was
That's my
taken out
favorite
and not
flower
put
bed.
somewhere
Go
else.
to that intersection with their,
And that little triangle is going to be taken out entirely.
Yeah, I think so. They're moving those power lines as the first step in that project
Yeah.
for V-Trans.
Will we find out about the Community Justice Center funding with the governor's budget then on the 28th, or?
That'll signal it a bit. I know the AG's office is advocating for funding there. That it'll be helpful to see that number in the governor's budget. And then we really won't have a firm idea on the number until probably April,
Okay.
when the state budget's set. One of the topics I'll be bringing up for the advocacy to the legislature is stability in that CJC funding and continued grant funding to Williston and Chittenden County that enables the services to continue to be provided at the level they are with local impact. The group I'm working with, we're really advocating it's important to have, local volunteers, centers active locally in the communities, but there may be some ways to look at evolving the model where of the three communities separate from Burlington, one of those hosts the funding coming from the state. It's maybe sub-granted out to the other sites, but that administrative load is taken on by one center. Then there's some partnerships built in, so if there's some staffing capacity or issues or other challenges, those three centers could be more of a unit to help out each other and not be so much of a silo in a vacuum. So we're hoping we could get there, but it's we get about $130,000 in state grant funding right now. If that's modified or goes away completely, we'd have to look at how the services are delivered forward. I think having a robust administrative structure moving ahead and stability. These have been one-year grants for a number of years. It's really challenging for the staff that's doing great work and the volunteers are doing great work, just with that uncertainty year to year. So we're hoping these conversations at the state level will add that clarity and get more stability moving forward. But the tricky part is it's going to fall in the state budget, and it's also for the state budget that starts in July. So it's hard to gauge exactly, but we'll have a better idea once the session's.
Any other questions or comments on the budget for this evening?
Mike's being very quiet.
Oh, you're muted, Mike.
I'm behaving myself.
And then the environmental reserve fund issue, is that something we're going to try to deal with in time to put it out for a vote if we decided to do that, or?
Yeah, if there's consensus from the board this evening to look at that, of what that question might look like on the warning, I asked the town attorney to start drafting language for the question today, to have that to you next week. I thought that might be a direction the board wants to go in.
Yeah. I'd like to see the
Okay,
wording.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
And maybe, I know I know South Burlington has some version of that, so I would just be interested if you could.
Well, we talked about, so the ERF, but the other issue was,
Capital reserve component for country parks.
So would it be, are we thinking just for the ERF, the penny, or are we thinking like half a penny split between that and the capital?
What's the other half?
Money to go into the capital planning for all the country park items, like the bridge replacements, the trail improvements, things like that.
Well,
Conservation adjacent.
Yeah, I think it's a nice package, and it also, there's a real concern. Anytime you start growing your infrastructure, you're going to have to support that infrastructure, and so I would like to have the money there to do both.
Right.
So I don't know how that's.
At least for this year, could it be like, 50% of it goes to conservation, 50% of it goes to, so.
Well, it can't just go to a fund to purchase land and support the land to make it usable. I don't know, it would be better not to tie it, but.
Part of the mechanics, it has to be tied to an established reserve fund. So we have the ERF as established reserve fund, but the capital fund isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Shirley, isn't a capital reserve fund. It's a capital fund within the general fund, essentially.
Yeah.
So if there was a question asking that, you would also need the authority to establish a capital reserve fund for country park infrastructure. So the town attorney may recommend it's two separate questions. One is 3/4 of a cent for the ERF. The second is it's probably three. Shall the town establish a capital reserve fund for country parks? And then shall the town establish a 1/4 cent tax levy to then fund that capital reserve fund?
No, that's pretty
I was run by Bob Fletcher, but I think that
Probably
might be
too
the way he
complicated.
goes.
I feel like year one, if we're testing the waters, it could be like 3/4 of a cent for the.
It's just hard to put,
hard to put on a
ERF flyer, 3/4 of a cent. A penny is like way easier to.
We can get the language and you can decide what penny or part of a penny you want to plug in. That's easy enough to change once we have the
Look, we're
legal
being
framework.
conservative. We're 3/4 of a cent instead of a cent.
Okay.
because the definition of, or the charter or whatever, the definition of the Environmental Reserve Fund only applies to purchasing property?
I believe so, yeah. I don't believe it brings capital elements unless
Redo
colleagues on the Conservation Commission that more in the front of their mind.
It applies to purchasing land. There's a whole write-up that goes with it that says what it means. Purchasing land and purchasing easements. Yeah, it can be used to purchase land. It can also be used to purchase conservation easements. And it also can be used, I believe, to purchase easements for primitive trail connections.
So, but darn,
But trying it out, on one,
can't win them all.
but that may be the way to go for the first year,
Oh, yeah,
to-
no, we
and-
can't make it
and-
too complicated. But one of the very real concern that this is a lot of work to get passed every year, I don't think that's true. If you establish something, it's well understood, people vote for it, and it doesn't change year to
Yeah.
year. If you start changing it all the time, you lose,
Yeah.
people have lose faith in it, so
Yeah.
I can't solve the second part of that problem, just hopefully the first.
Yep.
So we should probably move on to the next item. I think we've actually covered the manager's report. Is there anything left on that?
Just before we move off that, so I'll build in these things from the possible budget ad sheet for further discussion still.
Yep. Okay,
We'll get that out for the end of the week.
great. Thanks.
The only other thing we had was an other business item.
Okay.
When you're ready to go.
I just had a question, since the quarterly report was in here. I was just curious that, it's a mutual aid question. It seems like we provide mutual aid twice as much as we receive mutual aid. And there's a comment in here somewhere, which I won't be able to find quickly, that seems to say there's some discussion about how mutual aid geographies or something are, there's some organization that deals with all this.
Yep.
And that makes me feel a little bit better, because it feels like if Williston makes hard decisions to correctly staff our fire department, and all they do is cover for Essex who's not correctly staffing, or South Burlington or Richmond or whoever, right? That doesn't really feel fair. So I would like to see those numbers closer, closer to balanced, but I'm happy to see that there's a mechanism perhaps to ask that question, because look, for 5 quarters in a row, it's been like 2x, providing mutual aid versus receiving mutual aid.
Yeah, there's a district, and there's priorities for each ambulance agency to provide that mutual aid, kind of what the run card is, which, if this ambulance is out, well, who's the next ambulance that you call in that matrix? And part of, as they looked at that over the last year, was additional mutual aid coverage for us to the southern part of Essex Junction, to a corridor, just over the river. But I can ask the fire chief. He can.
I don't need an
speak
answer,
more to
it's just
that,
a
too.
concern, because it seems like if Essex had an extra ambulance, they wouldn't need our ambulance to go there as often, right? And
Yeah, and I'm aware from the news that Essex Rescue is having some staffing challenges right now as well.
on the upside, we do get the revenue from those ambulance calls, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. If we had the information to say, this is how many mutual aid calls that we are responding to, and here's the cost of those calls, and I would hope we made a little profit off those, right? But we don't have that data, so.
Because the billing piece is missing.
Right, and because the billing piece, but then we'd have to get that through the accounting side to know, okay, who responded, how do we figure out the cost of that to say, oh, yeah, we're staffing up. I'm not saying we should staff up to do mutual aid, but we do get the revenue for it, but still getting the revenue for it may not be helpful if we're creating more expenses to be able to do that.
Right. Thanks, Shirley.
You're welcome.
You get me, Shirley. We're gonna go geek out about fund balances after this.
So was there other business?
One item, it's from the Vermont Bond Bank, a certificate of project completion. This was the purchase and upfit of a 2023 Osage ambulance that we took on debt for in 2023. Shirley passed this on to me. The select board needs to, the board needs to pass a motion to approve the certificate.
Yes, it's just something that sorry, I keep coming up here, but I know that you can't hear me.
Just move in there.
Can't hear me. As part of the compliance requirements for the Vermont Bond Bank, when we finish using the debt proceeds, we have to do a certificate of completion, and we've completed the purchase of the ambulance, and probably I should have done it a little while ago, so it's just crossing that T.
A motion would be in order to approve that certificate.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And a thumbs up from Mike. Here. Motion carries.
That's all other business we have this evening.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Right.
So, and final thoughts on items from this meeting? Are there anything, any issues or concerns that we need to circle back on from tonight's agenda? Hearing,
Say thank you to you both, as always, for,
Yep.
such hard work on the budget here.
Yes.
I know the process continues, but
yeah, it's a all. So there is an anticipated executive session and a motion for that.
okay. Move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 313A1B of the Vermont statutes, and further move we enter executive session to discuss the negotiating or securing real estate purchases or lease options under Title I, Sections 313(2) of the Vermont statutes, and invite Town Manager Eric Wells to join both discussions.
Is there a second? Any discussion on the motion?
Aye.
So that is it for the public portion of the meeting. We will not be coming back into public session after that. So,
Down Mike back in on the phone, or what do we?
Yep. Mike, I sent you a separate link for executive session, so I'll bring my computer downstairs and fire that up.
okay. So
All right, thank you. I got that.
we'll reconvene in executive session.